Okay, welcome to the Housing Commission's February 2nd, 2022 regular meeting. This is a teleconference meeting with Housing Commission members, city staff, and members of the public participating remotely to ensure proper social distancing in this federal, state, and local emergency. I will call the meeting to order at 6:34. And I'd like to introduce staff and Housing Commission members present. We have myself, Karen Grove, Chair, Lauren Bigelow, our Vice Chair. Commissioner Heather Leach is absent right now. Commissioner Nevada Merriman is here. Commissioner John Pimentel is here. And at the moment, Commissioner Chelsea Nguyen is absent. For staff, we have Acting Housing Manager Mike Noche and Contract Planner Payat Bhagat. And also, it doesn't say in my notes, but we have from the City's Attorney's Office, we have Eric Phillips. So welcome, everybody. Mike, could you please provide instructions to the Housing Commission and members of the public on how the meeting will proceed?
Yes, thank you. And apologies for the confusion there. We were lucky enough to get Eric on the meeting tonight. So thank you again, Eric, for your presence here. And thank you, Chair Grove and members of the Housing Commission. I want to welcome everyone in attendance to the February 2nd meeting of the Housing Commission. At this time, we ask that members of the Housing Commission please remain on screen for the duration of the meeting. You will control your own webcams and microphones. Staff will engage cameras and microphones to make presentations and respond to members of the Housing Commission. For members of the public who are in attendance and wish to provide public comment, after the chair calls for public comment on the item you wish to speak on, please use the raised hand feature or via telephone, press *9 to raise your hand to speak. And then I will have the ability to open your microphone and you can properly provide your comment to the Housing Commission. And that'll conclude my instructions and I will return the meeting to the chair. Thank you. Madam Chair, you're on mute.
Of course. Under public comment, the public may address the Housing Commission on any subject not listed on the agenda. Each speaker may address the Housing Commission once under public comment for a limit of 3 minutes. Please clearly state your name and address or political jurisdiction in which you live. The Housing Commission cannot act on items not listed on the agenda, and therefore the Housing Commission cannot respond to non-agenda issues brought up under public comment other than to provide general information. I see that Commissioner Nguyen has joined us. Welcome. And we'll just keep proceeding. Mike Noche, do we have any public comment?
Thank you, Chair Grove. And just a reminder for anyone who just signed on, for members of the public who are in attendance and wish to provide public comment, please use the raised hand feature to provide your public comment to the Housing Commission. And if you're dialing in, please push *9 and I'll have the ability to open your microphone and you can provide your public comment to the Commission. And I'll just give it another second. And I don't see any public comments for item C at the moment. So I'll return the meeting to the chair.
Okay. Under regular business, the Housing Commission receives informational presentations in addition to considering policy matters and administrative actions. Are there any clarifying questions from Housing Commissioners on item D1, which is to approve the minutes from the Housing Commission regular meeting on November 3rd, 2021, and Housing Commission special meeting on November 17th, 2021, before taking public comment on the item? Seeing none. Mike, do we have any public comment?
Thank you, Chair Grove. For members of the public who are in attendance and wish to provide public comment, please use that please engage your raised hand feature. And I'll have the ability to open your microphone. And I do not see any public comments for item D1. So I'll return the meeting to the chair.
Okay, so the item is open for Housing Commission discussion. Seeing no hands raised, do I have a motion and a second for the motion to approve the minutes as I stated earlier?
So moved.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Here, yes.
That's Nevada. Okay. And Mike, do you want to do the roll call vote?
Yes, please. That is how our city clerk's office would like us to proceed.
Okay.
So thank you, Chair Grove.
Mhm.
Commissioner Bigelow.
Aye.
Commissioner Leach is absent. Commissioner Merriman.
Yes.
Commissioner Nguyen.
Aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Pimentel.
Aye.
Thank you. And Chair Grove.
Aye.
All right, the item passes 501.
Okay. Item D2, recommendation on a below market rate housing agreement term sheet with Greystar for the Menlo Flats project at 165 Jefferson Drive. Contract planner Payal Bagat will introduce the item, followed by Andrew Marcos from the applicant team to provide a brief presentation. Thank you.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the commission, and members of the public. Just want to confirm that you can hear me clearly. So the project before you this evening is the review of the term sheet for a below market agreement for the Menlo Flats project. This project is a redevelopment of an existing site with 158 units, which are made up of 4 bedrooms and studio apartments. The project also has a first floor office area of about 13,000 square feet, along with approximately 1,600 square feet of retail. The project is proposing to develop 21 affordable units as part of the proposal. This is a bonus level development. The affordable units will be provided. The applicant has 2 proposals. Essentially, they are offering all the affordable units at low income, and the second proposal is a mixed income proposal. As you've reviewed in the staff report, staff is supporting the mixed income proposal, but we would like to share your thoughts on both the proposals. This concludes my presentation. I would like to turn it over to the applicant to give permission.
Hi, good evening, housing commissioners. I will just share my screen. And all right. So good evening again. My name is Andrew Marcos. I am representing Greystar for Menlo Flats here at this Housing Commission meeting. I'm here to give the presentation on Menlo Flats, which is our 3rd multifamily project following the Connect Menlo general plan amendment. But first, I thought I'd give you an overview of Greystar in Menlo Park. Between this project, Menlo Flats, and our recently approved projects, Menlo Uptown and Menlo Portal, and our completed project, Alon Menlo Park, we've worked and are working with the city to provide over 1,100 homes, and over 140 of these homes will be affordable BMRs. To go over some project highlights, Menlo Flats consists of 158 homes made up of studios and 4 bedrooms, 4 baths, and just under 15,000 square feet of non-residential space. So project highlights are that there are 21 affordable BMR homes located on site and equitably distributed throughout the building. There's a $4.84 million in lieu fee to the Community Amenity Fund that will be to be dispersed once community amenities are identified by the City Council and the community. This project achieves ambitious environmental goals, including LEED Gold certification and 100% electrification with no gas at all and ample EV charging. Lastly, the project includes over 5,200 square feet of publicly accessible open space that's consolidated along the Paseo on the eastern part of our site. The draft EIR comment period closed on December 9th. and we expect the project to go to Planning Commission with a response to comments from the EIR consultant in late March or early April. As far as our community outreach on this project, it's been extensive since 2020 and has continued on all our projects. We've sent flyers to over 6,000 addresses in Bellhaven and Menlo Park and East Palo Alto neighborhoods surrounding this project. We did this once in 2020, where we hosted individual meetings to solicit feedback, and we sent another round of flyers in November 2021 and hosted 2 virtual community meetings in addition to one-on-one virtual meetings. What did we hear in the process? We heard regarding the community amenity that the current community amenity list is outdated at this point, and either amenities were spoken for or they didn't reflect the current community's needs and wants, which is the reason we decided to contribute through the in lieu fee, which was recently passed by the City Council through an ordinance. The community also voiced need for BMR housing, and we had a number of requests specifically about BMR housing in this project and our other projects. And so as a result of that feedback, we've provided 2 alternatives for the 21 BMRs on our site, which we'll go into more detail on some of the following slides. So as mentioned, there are 21 units available in Menlo Flats for BMR rentals. We've provided 2 alternatives. One is all low income at the 80% AMI level, and we've provided an equivalent alternative at a mix of income levels. The project BMR units will be 100% compliant with the city's BMR guidelines. They are the same proportionate size as market rate units distributed throughout the project, indistinguishable from the market rate units, and inclusive to all parties. Our team looks forward to cooperating with the city on these BMR units and has done so up and down the peninsula on various projects. The proposed BMR mix, we have a little bit more detail here. So for alternative 1, we have 21 low income units. For alternative 2, there are 4 very low income units, 12 low income units, and 5 moderate income units. And all of these are subject to the city's 75% cap of market rate rent. Here is a slide of the sample distribution of the BMR units. Again, the units will be distributed throughout the project and indistinguishable from market rate units. That sums up the presentation, and I want to thank you for your time and look forward to your questions or comments.
Great. I will open it up to the commission for any clarifying questions, sort of factual questions, and then we'll open up to public comment. Chelsea, go ahead.
For the presentation, I'm just wondering, do you have the rates for each of the categories in the low income area or equivalent? Or is that still to be determined? What is the range?
So the rates are published by the City of Menlo Park, and if you give me just a minute, I can pull them up, but they change on a year-to-year basis. I believe they're released in April of every year. So I will look those up and be able to respond to that.
Maybe Mike can give it to me. Thank you so much.
Sure.
I just want to ask you, what happened if you have low income then equivalent? How would you do that if you already allot certain numbers? Would you say no to the person? If let's say you have 21 units, and what happened if you have I guess what I'm trying to say is that if you have more of low income than the equivalent or the 80%, what would you do? Like, who would you pick from the 2 renters?
I think I understand.
So
That's
I'll take a shot at responding. The applicant basically just needs to comply with the city's requirements. And so if they do comply with the city's requirements, I believe that there is a list that the city maintains, and people are for rental units randomly picked from that list.
Okay.
Yep, is that it, Chelsea? So, okay, I'll move on to Nevada.
Hi, thank you, Mr. Morcos, for your presentation and for being here this evening. I'd like, I saw a little bit of this in the staff report, but could you share with me the implications of SB 330 for this project and where we are in the process? Could you just walk us through that a little bit?
Yeah. So for anyone who may not know, SB 330 is a state law that essentially requires a city to approve a project's entitlement for a project application where the city is zoned for the multifamily development. And so that does apply in this scenario. And we filed a application, SB 330 application, and have gone through all the appropriate steps with the city to maintain that protection. So essentially, as long as we comply with the quote unquote objective standards that the city lays out, and those are basically standards that can be numerically defined or are clear black and white requirements, then our project should be approved by the city.
It was my assumption that there was like a maximum number of hearings, and where are we in that?
That's right. This is the third hearing, and the fourth hearing is intended to be the Planning Commission hearing, and the fourth hearing is intended to be the Planning Commission hearing, and the fifth meeting is saved for an appeal, or if City Council would like to hear the project.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and then when we previously met with you, I might be remembering this wrong, a lot has happened since, but it was my impression that you were somewhat resistant to the inclusion of moderate income units in the mix at that time. And again, if I have this wrong, you can help me clean it up, but my takeaway was that it was between where the market was and the rent needs to be, well, I guess it's a 75% restriction that the city has in there. The moderate units just weren't really going to be feasible.
Mm-hmm.
So I see them here now, and I am curious from your perspective, what has happened to change that.
Yeah, so the city has a great spreadsheet, honestly, and I believe it's in the package that compares the subsidized value between the two options. And essentially, if the subsidized value between the two options are equal, then it is considered an equivalent alternative. And when I spoke to you last time, I was under the impression that it basically had to be equal amounts of very low, low, and moderate income units without taking into account the full subsidy provided for each unit. But once we understood that and worked with it, we were able to work with the city to include a variety of different types of units, even with this, including considering the 75% cap.
Okay, thank you. That's the last for me.
Okay, Lauren, you're next. And Chelsea, I think your hand is still up from when you raised it initially. Go ahead, Lauren.
Thank you so much for the presentation. I just had a real quick question based on the elevation. It looked like maybe all of the BMR units were on the third floor. Was that right?
No, that was intended to be just an example of one floor. So they are dispersed throughout the floors, but that's just one example of a floor plan.
Beautiful, beautiful. And I so appreciate you guys having larger bedroom sizes as well. There's kind of a gap there in the middle between the studio and 4-bedroom though. And so I was curious if you could speak to how you came to that unit size mix.
So I'm going to get a little bit in the weeds of the code because the reason we knew we wanted to have a differentiated project here in terms of the unit mix. The reason that it has come about that we have 4 bedrooms and studios is because the city has both a dwellings per acre max and an FAR max. And so you have to find the median between those two to take advantage of the full allotted FAR and dwellings per acre. And that led us to 4 bedrooms and
Okay, Andrew, I think you concluded by saying that led us to 4 bedrooms and studios, but you have, I think, temporarily froze. So
Oh, no,
you're
there
back.
he is blinking.
I-
Yep.
Yeah, I
I'm
think
so sorry.
that's okay. You ended by saying 4 bedrooms and studios, and I think we got that.
Yep, understood. Thank you so
Yep.
much.
Okay. All right. John, if you don't have a question, I do, but I'm going to let you go first. Okay. My question is about accessible units throughout the development and among the BMR units. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so in California, all units are required to be accessible. And so all the units are ADA compliant.
Okay. That confuses me because of earlier conversations I've been having that only about 10% of our units are required. Maybe Mike can hop on and tell me what the difference is between your answer and the answer I got earlier in general.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. And maybe Andrew can point me in a good direction here, because I was also under the understanding from our building division, and maybe this is an item that we'll just have to follow up on, but it probably is a little pertinent to flush this out with regards to the components of item D3 on the agenda. So my understanding with the state building code requirements, that was about 10% have to be included as inclusionary, or excuse me, as accessible. Typically in a development, I know you just mentioned 100%, which is also a little confusing to me. Is that a provision of SB 330 by any chance, or is that a law that maybe we are unaware of? And maybe Eric can jump in as well if we need.
It's so for all our projects, we have a consultant who makes sure that every unit is ADA accessible. And I think sometimes some projects don't need to have 100% of the units be accessible. For example, our project along Menlo Park did not have an elevator where the units were. And so only the units on the first floor need to be accessible. So there are unique circumstances, but in an elevator, building, podium, wood frame, our project needs to be 100% accessible.
Okay. And I guess maybe there's there's a additional step, and I hope you don't mind me asking these questions, Madam Chair.
Please do.
So I know there's like an added step where you need to add fixtures into a unit. Would all of the units also meet that type of provision, or is it just the access into the unit?
No, all features of the unit need to be at a minimum adaptable. So in some cases, there's not a grab bar, but we install a grab bar for a prospective tenant.
Okay, and I guess my last question would be, it sounds like Greystar maybe goes above what would be considered the minimum. Would that be okay to kind of formulate here?
Yeah, the guidelines are a gray area. And so in order for a big company like Greystar, it's really important just to be, I'm showing all the cards, just to limit liability to as little as possible, to go above and beyond, cross all Ts, dot all Is regarding the ADA requirements. So I would say, yes, we go above and beyond what many developers might do.
Thank you for that clarification. I appreciate it.
And this will come up in the conversation later, but I think there also might be a little differentiating factor between what percentage of housing stock in Menlo Park is currently accessible versus what percentage of new units that are coming on that are accessible. Because as new units are created, as Andrew was describing, the Fair Housing Act and the ADA require certain accessibility thresholds, but that doesn't apply to the entirety of the housing stock or the entirety of the BMR program in the city, because those standards have changed over time. And as Mr. Morcos was describing, they apply a little bit differently based on the size of the building and the layout of the building. Also, buildings that receive federal funding assistance have additional accessibility requirements in terms of what features and what percentage of units have to have specified features that are specifically designed for increase the accessibility of those units to people of varying abilities. So we'll talk about that more. I don't want to take us on too far of a digression during Mr. Morcos's portion of the presentation, but I'm sure this will come up later this evening as well.
Okay, thank you. That was helpful. And we do need to get back to it, I think. And that's all my questions. I did want to just say thank you for providing the two options. I feel like the Housing Commission was heard when and we didn't have to ask for it again this time. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you all for helping point us in a direction that we could come to an agreement.
Great. Okay, so I think at this point, if there are no more questions, and I don't see any, we'll go to public comment.
Thank you, Chair Grove. For members of the public who are in attendance and wish to provide public comment, please engage the raised hand feature. I will then have the ability to open your microphone and you can provide your public comment to the Housing Commission. And I'll just give it a moment. And I don't see anyone dialing in either, and I do not see any public comment at the moment. So I'll return the meeting to the chair. Thank you.
Okay, so the item is now open for discussion. And really the question is between the two scenarios, I believe. Well, any discussion, I'll just leave it at that.
Well, I was hoping we could talk about the two scenarios and potentially ask the city for a little bit more than what was in the staff report in terms of the interpretation kind of, this is there's the BMR guidelines, and then there is kind of our established preferences over time and some of the things that we have as a commission brought up many times as how we'd like to see them implemented, and was interested in hearing Mike talk a little bit about the two scenarios and how he arrived at scenario 2 as the staff recommendation.
If I may, through the chair.
Oh, yes, please.
So I'll definitely let Payal provide additional comment here as needed. Feel free to jump in, Payal, but I will mention, so the portion of the report where I do come in is in attachment G, which does give you that breakdown of basically the all low income BMR units and the alternative, which is a close alternative basically to the low income subsidy of units. So really, we go through a calculation, given the direction of the commission and the needs in Menlo Park as far as RENA numbers and needing an array of units. We typically, in most cases, will move toward the proposal that does have a different allotment of different groups of income levels that will be served as a result. So that's typically the way that we would lean in most cases. If we really saw an overwhelming need for a lot of low income units, low income 80% AMI units to come online, then we would make that recommendation. But in most cases, we would pretty much always opt for the various income levels. And I know that's something we will continue to look at further in the future, and definitely invite Payal to, if I missed anything, please go right ahead and add.
No, I completely agree with the explanation that you provided, Mike. The other thing to consider is, the two scenarios or proposals made by the applicant, and this is something that they are able to provide as part of their project. This is something that they are able to fund and construct. So from a staff's perspective, like Mike was mentioning, we do want to see a mix of units so that we can serve various strata of affordable housing in the community. And the proposal that we supported in the staff report also includes like 4-bedroom units, which I as a project manager looking at the project, I thought that was a really great benefit to the community at the levels that it's being presented in the mixed income. So that was another thought that I want to just present that I had.
If I could, Mr. Noche, I think the attachment sheet is good. And for me, it's still lacking like a little bit of context, because the nature of my comments previously has been really about what are the incomes in the neighborhood and how does that align with this mix that's being presented. So it does kind of satisfy from a value of the subsidy in total, and it satisfies that those concerns for me, but it doesn't really put that in context with who we think might be able to afford these homes. And I'm sure that many people have heard me say this before, but it is here, we're here, and so we will probably also have to say it again. Our ordinance doesn't really contemplate that we have different neighborhoods with vastly different incomes, and a very low income family of 4 in San Mateo County is $99,000 a year. So we don't have anything lower than very low income, but there are certainly people in Menlo Park whose family incomes are under $99,000 a year. So kind of like our ordinance's failure to address the extremely low income, which is not just Menlo Park, it's also a failure of the way the state policy is set up. I think in some ways erases that these people exist and that they're part of our community. So in future presentations, if you could just try to give us some context for that, because that's a real concern. And I'm not able to really put the pieces together from the information provided. I think I can stop there, but it's my understanding that if you were to look at the community, that the average income falls between extremely low income and very low income. So we're kind of coming in over the ceiling there. That said, this proposal seems to match what the city requirements have set forth. So I'll stop there.
Yeah, and I'll endorse what you just said and reference the Bmr guidelines proposal presentation, where we actually put numbers on that and highlighted the flaws with our system, that it's not meeting our low income community members' needs. But I agree with you that it should be kind of everywhere that we talk about this, to, you know, at least fail in a knowing way instead of hiding our failures, because we're more likely to address them if they're in front of us. So I support that. Mike, do you want to respond, or should I go into Lauren?
Yeah, thank you, Chair Grove. I'll just say that I agree with definitely all of those comments, and definitely in support of us looking into that further in the future. I'll also add that you know, our income levels are set, as you all know. I'm just wanted to state this for anyone listening in. You know, our income levels are stated for the entire county, so that's an average, and we have above average incomes throughout the county, as everyone knows. So even the low income, or what most would consider low income in San Mateo County, is quite high. So there is a huge subset, would be my assumption, you know, with regards to who is in the community and has a need. I'm sure that need is very great for that extremely low and very low population. So I definitely look forward to working with the commission in the future to better serving that in our development community, for that matter, as well.
Okay, Lauren.
So I just wanted to know what the very low and low income rents were, what AMI they were pegged at, because it looks like there's only a $52 difference between them. And so I was just hoping to see, and if you guys were using 1 or 2 people for occupancy.
I'm happy to jump in, Andrew, if you'd like.
That'd be great.
Just on the calculations.
Yeah.
So in our income limits, which are for the city, it's and I'm going off memory right now because I don't have this pulled up in front of me, but for a studio, we typically, so across the board, we're looking at 30% of a household's income. So what you mentioned, Commissioner Bigelow, with regards to the very low income, so in scenario 1 on attachment G,
Right.
so for very low income and low income being so similar, the highlighted yellow, that's where we had to incorporate the 75% rent cap, excuse me, which is why those numbers became so close. And this is basically a point in time estimate. Essentially, when the units actually come online, we'll be reassessing what the rents are at that time based on the annual income limits for that time period as well, which, as Mr. Marcos stated, do get released typically around April, May time annually. I hope that answered it, but I'm happy to go into additional detail if needed.
Got it. It was just in terms of the income spread, if you were pegging it towards the bottom or the top of the spread was what I was asking about. But it sounds like the spread didn't matter. The 75% cap overall was what came into play. And I appreciate that. And I hear my fellow commissioners on the desire to incorporate ELI in extremely low income units into market rate properties, and also want to say that this proposal coming forward with a mixed income spread shows a responsiveness on Greystar's part to our desire. So I just want to call that out and appreciate it as well. So hopefully next time you guys come around, we'll have some ELI work to do as well.
I'm still interested in your question, Lauren, though, for the ones that are not pegged at 75%. So I'll ask that. Where are you pegging the rents? 30% of what income level for? for any, what is your policy? Is it?
Sure. So it's so we look at the market rate rent. Well, really we start at like for a very low income unit. So for a 4-bedroom, that would have, we'd look at the 4-person level. And I'm going to try not to get lost in the calculations, but essentially we take that, what a family of 4 would be making, because it's 1 person per bedroom typically. And I believe that's what we use for the 4-bedroom calculation. We take 30% of that total. And that is what is basically affordable on an.
Yeah, okay. But there are people who make a range of incomes who qualify for that 4-bedroom unit. What part of the range are you pegging the rent at?
Yeah, the
high.
The rent is pegged at the high, we
Thank
have
you.
to peg them at the maximum.
Okay.
So that
Unless
would
the
be,
city had a policy to do otherwise, but
so that would be 50% for the very low and 80% for the low income.
right, yeah, 80% AMI, correct.
Got it.
And then
Okay.
we're
And
just
then
to
capping it.
clarify,
at 75.
we don't want any, and just as a very last summary, we don't want any household paying more than 30% of their gross income toward housing expenses. And those housing expenses, this maximum rent has to include utilities and other unit expenses, basically. So that is the max that the developer can charge, basically, or the property management at the time.
But people at the low end of the range that qualifies for the unit are paying more than 30%.
It's an imperfect system, to be honest with you, but
Got it.
we
Okay.
do have to go off the maximum, essentially.
Okay, thank you. All right, I see that Chelsea has her hand raised. Go ahead, Chelsea.
Hi, Mike. So I'm just wondering, what you're saying is that every year we will revisit the threshold and also the amount that the BMR units are being rented out at? Is that what you're saying? Every year in May?
No, just the overarching statement there is that the HCD, the state agency who releases the income levels for each county throughout California, they release those on an annual basis. And we basically, those are released typically in April, May, every year.
And Menlo Park follows that guideline. That's what you're saying, right?
Correct. Yes, correct.
Great, thanks.
Absolutely.
Okay, do commissioners have thoughts on mixed versus all low income?
I'll just go out and say that I favor the mixed income proposal because it gets closer to what the community needs and has told us what they need.
I agree with that. Did somebody want to make a motion?
Sure, I'll motion to accept staff's proposal.
Do I?
Second.
All right. Okay, Mike, you can take a roll call vote.
Thank you, Chair Grove. And I just wanted to confirm, was that Commissioner Pimentel with the
Yeah.
second? Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. All right, and I will take a roll call vote now. Commissioner Bigelow.
Aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Leach is absent. Commissioner Merriman.
Yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Nguyen. I believe that was an aye, but I just wanted to confirm you were on mute.
Sorry, yes, sorry about that.
No worries. Thank you. Commissioner Pimentel.
Aye.
Thank you. And Chair Grove.
Aye.
Thank you. And the item passes 5-0-1 with Commissioner Leach absent.
Okay,
Thank you, everyone.
All right, so we will move on to item D3, which is to recommend the city council consider changes to the interest list eligibility requirement and general program description edits below market rate program guidelines. And Mike will provide us a brief presentation and we'll take it from there.
Thank you, Chair Grove. And just managing my screens here. So let me get our presentation teed up. All right, and everyone should be able to see the presentation in front of you. Great. All right, so this evening, sorry, there we go. All right, so this evening we are discussing the below market rate guidelines. I'm just going to provide a background about the guidelines themselves, and we'll be looking mainly this evening at the proposed preference updates to the guidelines, and then we'll welcome feedback and recommendations before we move forward. So the goal of tonight is to inform staff and receive feedback so that we can make a recommendation to the City Council on potential changes. So just as some background, as I mentioned about the guidelines, they were last revised in 2018 in the Menlo Park housing element for 2015 to 2023. The program does call for potential modifications to the BMR guidelines. And in early 2021, the Housing Commission did establish or reestablish a BMR guidelines ad hoc subcommittee. And the subcommittee, I just want to thank the members of the subcommittee, which are Commissioner Grove and Pimentel. And I know we've added Commissioner Nguyen, who will be assisting, or excuse me, not Pimentel, Bigelow. My apologies. I was looking at Commissioner Bigelow on my screen and said Pimentel, apologies. And then Rachel Horst, who unfortunately had to move out of the city, but we definitely appreciated her input on the guidelines as a member of the subcommittee. So that being said, the subcommittee did provide a presentation, which is attached to the staff report on October 6th of 2021. I definitely appreciate all of the work that the subcommittee has done in providing that input. And basically, the subcommittee looked at a wide array, excuse me, of potential changes to the guidelines. That being said, not that there were too many, but there were a lot, and that is something that staff acknowledged as well, that there are a lot of updates that we potentially want to make. Staff felt it was best to divide the recommendations into two stages. Stage one are the BMR preference criteria that we're going to talk about this evening. And stage two, which may include additional studies, which staff is assessing, will involve development fees and inclusionary unit requirements. And our timeline for that, which is in the staff report, is potentially 6 to 8 months. We'd like to bring it back sooner, but given staff capacity challenges, that is our current timeline. So the BMR interest list, I wanted to make sure we highlighted this. The previous practice for the city was to maintain both a BMR purchase list and then a separate rental interest list. So that is no longer our practice. The BMR purchase list, which I'll get into in more detail, was a weighted list, essentially. So when someone was to sign up, they would basically go to the bottom of the list, and if someone signed up before them, they would basically have a higher priority at getting into a unit. That being said, our new practice is that we've centralized the interest list, which makes the operation of the list a much easier and also aligns much better with our lottery system for units as they come online. And I also wanted to include HouseKey's website for any members of the public that are following along. Definitely welcome anyone to visit the housekeys10.com website, where there's a lot of information, and that is where members of the public can go to sign up for housing opportunities that come online and units that come online. The BMR purchase legacy list was a list that was associated with that purchase list, and basically we wanted to honor the fact that households were required to annually update their information and file with our previous providers, and we felt it was necessary to basically create a legacy list. So basically anyone who was on that legacy list for the purchase list as of January 1st, 2021 was transferred to our legacy list. And I have added a provision into the updated proposed guidelines that basically states that those folks will receive the priority over other buyers until that list is exhausted, and that no new households can be added, and that fees are no longer charged. So it's basically frozen. And we've got about 130 households on that list. And they are of various sizes and income. So for folks who are listening, thinking that they would then have a really low opportunity or a possibility of applying to an ownership unit because we have a legacy list, that wouldn't necessarily be true, because not all legacy list members are going to be applying for the same unit that comes online, given size and income requirements, and if they qualify at that time. So I definitely want to recommend that everyone who is interested apply. And that'll be on the HouseKeys 10 website. As far as the BMR guidelines preference criteria, so this is where we'll definitely dive in more detail. And as we move through this evening, I can definitely bring the presentation back onto the screen to help guide our discussion as needed as well. So the displacement preference in the, and I also want to give another disclaimer that our current guidelines assessed how we would make these changes. We realized that we really wanted to make additional oh, did I just freeze? Can you hear me
froze
okay now?
for a moment.
Okay.
A moment ago, you froze for a moment.
Okay, I apologize. Let me close other programs on my computer just to keep us running more efficiently here. Okay. Can you still hear me okay?
Yes.
Great, thank you for confirming. All right, so what I was mentioning is that as we went through and started to update the preference criteria, we realized we really needed to probably do a deeper dive to better align with how we operate the BMR program. So what I've done is I've picked out basically the most pertinent preference objectives that we'd like to propose. And definitely invite your feedback on these items this evening. So they'll pretty much be on these next few slides, starting here with page 5. There are additional changes that we've made in the guidelines, but that's really more related to the programming and just to better align with how the program operates, essentially. So if there are items in the guidelines that any of the commissioners have questions about, I'm happy to pull up the staff report if needed in the guidelines. I'm hoping we don't have to go into great detail, but if we need to, we're happy to take that step. So getting into it, the displacement preference specifically. So in the past, and this has been an item that the commission did discuss in 2018, however, it wasn't adopted by City Council. A resident must reside in Menlo Park in the exact year 2008 and then have been subsequently displaced. The proposed change would be residing in Menlo Park anytime since 2008 for a period of 3 or more years, and then subsequently displaced. And that would essentially promote those longtime residents being able to potentially return to Menlo Park. And it would not matter where they move to, just that they would receive a preference to return to Menlo Park. And we'll definitely have time to go through questions, and I can bring these back up, but I'll move through this as expeditiously as possible here. Unhoused persons or households preference. The current guidelines require someone's last permanent residence to be in Menlo Park. So it means they had to have been renting or owned a home. It basically doesn't validate someone who might be homeless in Menlo Park and for whatever reason has decided to stay in Menlo Park. And we'd like to find those people housing opportunities or a household if we have someone who is living out of a vehicle. So the proposed change would allow a preference for folks experiencing that type of situation, and would basically require evidence that they currently reside in Menlo Park. And the other caveat to that, and open to suggestions as well, but the documentation piece we felt was pretty important because we do want to make sure folks are finding resources. So that is a carryover that I just wanted to highlight, which would be from a case manager or homeless services provider in the area. And if anyone were to contact with questions about that, we would absolutely put them in contact with a local agency. All right, so the live and work preference. So the current guidelines require a minimum 1-year residency. The proposed changes remove the 1-year residency, and then we expand the work to include unpaid and volunteer work. It may have been a bit confusing potentially in how I staged it in the staff report, but I did want to clarify that the 20 hours per week minimum is still required for both volunteer, for paid and unpaid work. And then our reason for including these is to promote stable communities for folks who live here to stay here, and for folks who do work in the area to hopefully move closer to where they work and reduce those vehicle miles traveled. That's one of the reasons, one of the main highlights. So the accessible unit preference, and I actually have 2 slides on this because I definitely believe there'll be the most questions on this item, but I'll move through and we'll definitely work through it. So the accessible unit preference, there's a overarching typically, although what we learned from our last item is that it does look like some developers are including more accessible units, which is great. But typically, my understanding is that there's typically a limited number of accessible units that are produced. And that's right around 10%, I believe, is what's in the building code. So if a developer is going above and beyond, that's great news, and staff can definitely follow up on that. But in most larger developments, there would be at least 10% of all units in the building would be required to be accessible. And then what we would assume is that a smaller subset would be BMR units and accessible, is what our conclusion. That being said, the current guidelines go into detail on only including wheelchair users, and also the way the guidelines are currently written, the wheelchair user preference only applies to ownership and purchase opportunities, essentially. So our proposed change is to expand on the preference to include all persons with accessible needs across the board. And then we absolutely we'll be inviting feedback. And just to guide that feedback, what we're hoping is that, or what staff is hoping, is that we receive some questions about, we did receive some questions about the clarity of the item in the staff report. So our goal is to essentially kind of follow the ranking of accessible units that we have listed here to then inform the language in the BMR guidelines. So essentially what we've outlined is, or what I've outlined is that accessible units are assigned to Menlo Park households with accessible needs in the order of the lottery ranking. So basically, and the question I have for you all is including all of the preferences. So it would be adding the live, work, displacement, and unhoused, which I think is the intention here, but wanted to clarify that as well. And then step 2 would be accessible units are assigned to non-Menlo Park households. So someone who's doesn't meet a Menlo Park preference, but still has an accessible need in the order that they were ranked in the lottery. And then all remaining units are assigned to Menlo Park live, work households in order of the lottery ranking, followed by folks who don't meet any of the preferences across the board. So we'll probably need to come back to this, and that's okay. But I think my intention here is to clarify what was written in the staff report and potentially better highlight the language in the guidelines, but want to confirm with the Housing Commission that this is the intent, and definitely open to suggestions. So, and I did list a summary here just to clarify. So the city can use the live, work, displacement, and unhoused preferences in the ranking of accessible units. So that is something that is allowed. Staff will update the guideline language, as I mentioned there, dependent on your feedback. So in summary, all income levels, and I wanted to highlight this because it is very important. All income qualified persons and households are welcome when they're applying for affordable BMR rental and ownership opportunities in Menlo Park. So anyone who is interested, who qualifies with the correct income category for a unit is allowed to apply. Everyone is included. The preferences don't prevent that. And the preferences, basically what it does affect is someone's final ranking, essentially. And I did want to highlight that it basically can take longer for a person to be placed into a BMR unit as a result. So that is a subsequent item that can come up. That being said, your input is very vital to this process, and I also wanted to highlight that. So as we work through this, I definitely want to say that I appreciate everyone's input, and I look forward to discussing this further and elaborating where needed. And just want to thank everyone again. And I'll turn to the chair.
Great. I definitely think we should do clarifying questions before public comment, because the public will probably benefit from clarifying questions, and their comments will be more informed. So I'll take people's questions at this point. Lauren.
I'm just a chatty Cathy this evening. Okay, or highly confused. Highly confused chatty Cathy, I don't know. So a few questions. Point of clarification. Do the interest lists for the BMR households ever close?
They do not. They're always open.
Okay, so they're always open. That's great. And I very much appreciate that we're trying to go into what seems to be a more nuanced and intersectionally responsive BMR preferences, what with folks who are unhoused or have disabilities or live or work, are those all weighted the same, or are there tiered, is there a tiered situation going on here? I was trying to understand how heavily each of those preference categories fit in.
Yeah, thank you for that question, Commissioner Bigelow, because that is very important. And I may not have put it as eloquently as I wanted to in the presentation. So on that ranking, essentially, because the preferences will affect ranking. All of the preferences, essentially, except for one, are ranked the same, or basically give someone the same preference level or ranking priority as the others. The only exception to that, and that's where I wanted to bring some clarity to how it was proposed in the staff report. Not that we I didn't mention that we wanted input to elevate the item, but just definitely wanted to work through that and receive feedback from the Housing Commission. But the accessible unit item is the one preference that would have higher priority. And the items that I listed in that one, and I can bring it back up in the presentation that listed basically the orders that we would go through the ranking. So someone who met one of the Menlo Park preferences and had an accessible need would basically be, all of those households or persons would have the highest ranking when going through the lottery, essentially. So but overall, the accessible need would be the highest ranked priority nonetheless.
Can I take a shot at language that might help us going forward with this?
Please do.
There are two preference categories. One is related to needing an accessible unit. And the other one is related to being what I'm going to call a Menlo Park household. You can be a Menlo Park household if you work in Menlo Park. You can be a Menlo Park household if you live in Menlo Park, if you don't have a home, but you reside in Menlo Park, or if you were displaced from Menlo Park. You can check off multiple boxes or one box, you are a Menlo Park household. And that is one type of preference, and the other one is related to accessibility needs. Does that make sense?
Yes, and with regard to how many boxes you check in the Menlo Park resident, there's no differentiation as long as you have one box checked. So if you are an unhoused person, you can check Menlo Park, even if you say, if you aren't displaced, sorry, let me back up real quick. So you can be an unhoused person living outside the bounds of Menlo Park who has been displaced from Menlo Park and lived there previously for 3 years since 2008 and still have the same ranking as somebody who lives or works in the community.
Correct.
Okay, got it. So what documentation is considered acceptable for unhoused members, since it's pretty difficult to get things that are considered documentation regularly, like mail, if they're unhoused?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there is an affidavit that would have to be signed by that individual, and it's on the, I believe it's in one of the packets that House Keys has on their website. And then in addition, we would need that case manager, basically someone to verify that this individual did meet the, if it was the unhoused, they would need to meet that. They would have to have the case manager. If it's the displaced, they would need to show that they they would have to have proof essentially. And that goes for, if I may just add really quickly, all of the preferences are vetted at the time of application. So
Right.
if they meet any of the preferences, accessible, live, work, displaced, all unhoused, all of them have to be vetted in order to move forward through the application process.
Right. And anybody in any level of preference can apply at any time for any of these units. Nothing is double checked on until you're contacted to come in for an interview for the unit. Okay, and I think so if one last question, thank you for your patience, which is, if a person is unhoused and not working with supportive services, they do not get to claim unhoused. Is that right?
So our intention would be to work with that individual to, you know, if a city staff member has seen this individual for, let's say, multiple years throughout the city, and, you know, chances are they will have been in contact with, like, you know, we are in close contact with our homeless outreach teams and so forth in the area. So chances are that someone will be in contact, but if they weren't, we would hopefully guide them toward that ultimate goal of them being housed.
Okay, but essentially, no.
We would need proof nonetheless. We would have to, as it is described in the guidelines, we would need to have.
Totally appreciate it. And it's about managing expectations and what is, you know, for the best for each individual in the community. So I just wanted to make sure I understood completely. Thank you.
Nevada, you're next.
I guess I'm a little bit confused because I thought that, and was it for a different policy where we had stretched the definition of who lived or worked in Menlo Park to include our unhoused community members? I thought we had already done that.
We had, but this is updating the way we do that to make it more generous.
I don't know if I agree with that. I mean, it just the previous details as I have seen them implemented seem to have more pathways for people to provide that they could including a number of things. So, I mean, I suppose the affidavit with the case manager goes a long way, but I'm wondering if we've really kind of looked at the other progressive cities in the region and seen what it is that they're doing to make sure that we're having a really open mind and casting the widest net possible there.
Can we look at that slide, Mike, while Nevada's bringing this up?
Sorry, my computer's not doing what I'd like it to.
Unhoused. That, to me, it seems more progressive to not require that the last permanent residence be in Menlo Park. Do you disagree with that?
My perspective is highly informed by working for an affordable housing developer who has implemented a preference list, and people have really unique situations. So you have somebody who may put down that they are living in Santa Clara because their sister lives in Santa Clara, and that address, they know that their sister is going to get that important piece of information to them, and they may not have any other way to get that. And you have, you know, as many people on your list, you have that many different sort of setups for what people are doing here. So I think I can think of 5 other scenarios that are real scenarios that have happened in Bellhaven on lease-ups that required really patient sort of case management to kind of move all the way through. And that may just be what this requires, but I think that I think we probably have to go a little further in how we're describing this. And I think that there are examples of that in this region that try to capture that a little bit better. Because the last permanent residence, I don't know, it's a lot of, you know, you check the wrong box or you put the wrong address down, and all of a sudden you might not get called for a unit that you, and it's pretty high stakes. And I think that the people that will be filling this out, they're not going to know that, you know, they check a box in this way and it tracks them to the category where they have no chance of ever getting a unit versus. So folks are going to interpret this from a different lens. So I want this to be, I appreciate that it's trying to be more generous, and I think we probably have a little bit more work to do to really get it.
In the interest of getting this done, I'd like us to decide what we need to do. And I'm wondering if a solution to the issue that you're raising would be to keep our previous one of requiring the last permanent residence to be in Menlo Park, or requiring evidence that their current residence is in Menlo Park. One or the other.
I mean, it comes down to that form, the affidavit form. That's the thing that needs to be, that's how most people are going to prove it, is that they are through that. It's like a method of self-attestation, or in this case, you know, if we allowed people to do it themselves, that would probably be, that's usually actually considered the most generous. In this case, we're asking people to go through a case manager that are somehow going to certify. So
so it's the last thing, the documentation from a case manager, that is the barrier.
It's human error on the case manager and the person who will be filling this out. It's like and so I get why you're pushing us here. And I'll see if I can find something while the rest of the folks talk to work on this. But
yeah, are you satisfied with the way we do it currently? Because that also came from you. It was recommended by you as what Sunnyvale was doing at the time. And we used their words exactly. I think we might ask Eric about this, because I think our city attorney proposed this change. So a question for you is, are you happy with the status quo on this question?
Well, I think
go ahead, Eric.
I'm sorry, who was that question?
Actually, it's a question for both of you. Well, my first question was to Nevada. Are you happy with the status quo on how we define unhoused people or households?
I thought it was a step in the right direction, and through seeing a few lease-ups now play out with that, the changes, I think that there's a possibility for error, or for it not to have the intended outcome.
Okay. All right. Okay, now, Eric, I want to ask you to respond to all of this. And are there some reasons that we made the changes that we did?
Well, I mean, the only change to the language that's proposed in the guidelines is to go from the individual's last permanent residence to their current residence. So that can be defined very broadly. And then the evidence is just all the guidelines calls for are some evidence of where they live and then it says and or documentation from the case manager or homeless services provider demonstrating current residency, including places or structures other than the bona fide dwelling unit, and all that's staying the same. So I think that the change was trying to get at direction that staff heard about making this more broad or more accessible to people who might be unhoused within the community right now. I think, Chair, what you had suggested, that if the language were to say that an unhoused person definition is expanded to include either that their last permanent residence was in Menlo Park or their current residence, is an even broader tent. And I think that the and or language that's in there allows for some of the flexibility and discretion that Commissioner Merriman is describing, so that when the city's program administrator is actually vetting applications, they have a little bit of discretion within the framework of the guidelines to work with the applicant. But the point about how the documentation works and how it gets administered by the program administrator, I think is totally valid and legitimate, but it's also more detailed than the current guidelines or the proposed guidelines get into. They're just kind of setting the parameters, and then it will be up to staff to work with the service provider to apply that and come up with the parameters for that documentation.
Okay, I think that's helpful.
I agree. Thank you. I think that satisfies my concern. Thank you.
Okay, John, you're next.
I don't want to continue swimming through this issue, but I have a practical question. I think Nevada's point that every person on the list probably has a unique story and set of circumstances is a complexity that is hard for us to develop policy and language around. I'll ask a practical question. A family I know lived for several years in Bellhaven, let's just assume it's 3, in a rented home. The homeowner decided to sell, evicted them. The father works in Palo Alto, actually for the city of Palo Alto, and commutes now from Visalia, literally 3 hours. But they have a permanent residence in Visalia. So would they qualify to be on the list? Or is that not the, is that?
They not only qualify, they have preference because they were displaced from Menlo Park.
But their last permanent residence, well, I'm sorry, but they have a permanent residence now in Visalia.
That's okay. The permanent residence applies to qualifying as an unhoused person who lives in Menlo Park.
Thank you. Understood.
All right, Chelsea, you're next.
Thank you. So I think that after reviewing the unhoused sections, unhoused persons, I think the current guideline is actually more lenient because it's asking for the last permanent residence instead of the current. So I just think that, I mean, that's the way what I'm reading right now is between the current guidelines and the proposed. I think the current guideline is actually more lenient than the proposed one. The proposed one will require for them to kept currently right now to be residents of Menlo Park. So anyway, that's my opinion on the unhoused person, is to keep the current guidelines because it's easier for them to come back to Menlo Park. Thank you.
In effect, using the or language achieves what you're saying and also provides another path towards being qualified as a resident of Menlo Park if you're unhoused. So I think that the solution that we've come to satisfies your opinion fits into it, Nevada's opinion fits into it. And so I think we're in a good place on that. Do you agree with that?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
And from a pragmatic perspective, just trying to make sure that we have a motion that I understand. So are we moving on the displacement on the, no, because these are just clarifying questions, aren't they? And we need, yes, okay.
Right.
We need public comment first.
Yeah, we got into discussion, sorry. Yeah, clarifying questions. Okay. Are there any clarifying questions since this slide is up on the displacement preference? I do have one, and it's just about the language and also about our conversation last meeting. I believe we talked about having the displacement preference just not have a date. If you have been displaced from Menlo Park and you can show that you've been displaced from Menlo Park, then you should count as a Menlo Park household. So that's my first part of the clarifying question. And second part of the clarifying, do we have to have a date? And then the second part, if we do have to have a date, let's make sure it's inclusive of people who were displaced on January 1st of 2008, and just make sure that the language is that inclusive.
And if I may, Chair Grove, I'll go ahead and answer that question, and I'll definitely welcome input from Eric. But so to answer that question, I don't believe we need to have the 2008 year as that threshold. So I think that can be deleted, and we could just go with the 3 or more years basically at any time in Menlo Park, and then subsequently displaced. And in the guidelines, and I tried to keep the presentation as brief as possible, being I know the guidelines were available to everyone, but it would be still due to economic conditions beyond their control, which would be limited, but would be including but not limited to items such as job loss, rent increases, evictions, foreclosures, and other forms of economic hardship, which staff would work with that household to determine, or third party.
Thanks. Chelsea, clarifying question?
I would say we just do away with the date, the 2008 on both.
You're doing the same thing we did. Clarifying questions, not opinions yet. We'll wait after public comment. We'll discuss opinions. Sorry to cut you off.
It's okay.
Any other clarifying questions on any of the? Do you want to turn the page, Mike, so we can be prompted? Yeah, I think I'm done with my clarifying questions. And it seems like everyone is. Pregnant pause. Okay, let's go to public comment. Mike, can you check for that?
Yes, thank you, Chair Grove. All right, for members of the public who are in attendance and wish to provide public comment to the commission, please use the engage the raised hand feature. I'll then have the ability to open your microphone and you may address the Housing Commission with your public comment. And it does look like we have a couple. So give me one moment here. I'll get our timer ready to go. Okay, and our first public comment will be Jan Stokely. Jan, you should be able to unmute your microphone and address the Housing Commission.
Great, thank you. I'm Jan Stokely, Executive Director of Housing Choices. Thanks for your discussion and all your work to open up these amazing communities that you're going to be building. and Menlo Park to a greater diversity of the community. It's really impressive, the work you're doing. So thank you. We submitted some comments, but I just wanted to bring up a question that was prompted by the Gray Star development. It sounds like the Gray Star development will be implementing universal design principles. So all the apartments will be accessible by an elevator, and the doors will be of a certain width, and a wheelchair will be able to be turned around in the bathroom, in the kitchen, and so forth, which is awesome. We love universal design. But my question is, in a project that is fundamentally a market rate project, the requirement that landlords pay for reasonable modifications, a typical market rate project, the landlord has to make modifications available to a person with disabilities, but they don't have to pay for the modifications. The tenant would pay. So if this is a market rate project, then will the BMR units be treated in that same way for purposes of deciding who has to make the modifications? And that's so important, particularly with respect to the BMR units, because these are folks who are of lower income, and saying, yes, we'll make the modifications, but you have to come up with $17,500. That might not be actually, much of a concession to the tenant. So I think it would be important, assuming that these are treated as market rate properties and tenants are required to pay for reasonable modifications and remove them at the end of their tenancy, then even though the Gray Star project is universal access, maybe the BMR units, the landlord should be required with respect to their BMR units to make reasonable modifications at their expense, which is how it would be typically done under Section 504 of the Fair Housing Act, with respect to affordable and publicly financed and local government owned properties. So that's my question. And I did want to just speak in favor of inserting the or in the homeless one. I could give a ton of examples, but the or would be very valuable to insert. And thank you so much again. This is really great work and we appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. And we do have another public comment. Give me one moment. Sorry, my participant bar went away. Okay, apologies. All right, our next public commenter will be Pam Jones. Pam, you should be able to unmute your microphone now.
Yes, good evening, and thank you, commissioners, for doing this work. It's important to bring it up to date. I have a couple of things. One of them is around the income. For example, extremely low at $38,400 is $3,200 a month. 30% is $960. In other words, the chart that's here is not reasonable when you match it with the incomes, unless my math is off. And I think it's time that the city of Menlo Park take a bold step and question the county and the feds on their chart. Menlo Park has been known to have the most expensive rents and houses in California and probably beyond. So I think that's a piece that could be used. My other things have to do with reporting. First of all, I wanted to know where I would find the procedures, the reporting, whatever that is supposed to be in the reports that the people that are renting, so the apartment owners or their managers, what are they required to present? Who gets that report? And then for transparency, there has to be a way in which a few questions could be answered so that we really know what's happening at these units. are people being moved and displaced because they've done a change in their rates, but the change didn't match what the city has told them to do, but we don't know that? I made this up, you know, I'm not saying that happened. But, you know, situations like that, you know, are they increasing the rent, you know, appropriately, you know, compared to their income? So anyway, just a reporting mechanism so we know exactly what's going on. The second bold step I'm going to ask you for is to recommend increasing the BMRs to 18%. I've always said 20 to 25%, but maybe if it's still in the teens, it won't be so scary. Maybe if it's still in the teens, they'll think about getting that new pencil that I'm always referring to. There has to be a way that we can move that piece forward because they're doing quite well. So anyway, those were my two areas of interest. And again, thank you for your work.
Thank you for your comment, Pam. And one last call to members of the public who would like to provide a public comment to the commission. And not seeing any additional hands raised, I will return the meeting to the chair. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. So now we're ready to discuss and craft a motion, as Lauren was getting us started with. Lauren, to set your mind at ease, I took a note about where we landed with unhoused households. So any further discussion?
Are we taking each of these pieces separately, or are we doing one collective motion?
Whoever brings up another area, that's what we'll do next. And then we'll try to discuss that area and move on to the next one. How's that? So should we go through the slides? All right, let's go through the slides in order. Then we know we've covered everything.
Okay.
And give me one moment. I'll, if you'd like, Chair Grove, I can go to the beginning of the preference section if that's preferred.
That'd be great. And we'll just go in order.
Okay, so I believe I started with the displacement preference.
I have comments on this one, but I'm going to wait and see if others do first. Okay, my comment. I would like us to take the date away entirely. And my reason for that is that the foreclosure crisis that we call the crisis of 2008 actually took place in the 90s in communities of color. The predatory lending practices and the ballooning mortgage interest rates were causing people who owned their homes but took on these predatory loans as refinancing to lose their homes. So they were displaced throughout the country and in Menlo Park. Those practices were discovered. There was an investigation. People put all the blame on the people of color for being supposedly irresponsible lenders and looked aside from the corrupt practices of the white financiers. And so the practice continued, and then it became the foreclosure crisis of 2008 that hit all communities. So I think putting the date sort of misses the point for us. And it should be anyone who's been displaced from Menlo Park for all those reasons, because I would really hate to do that and not have the people who were displaced through that predatory lending that was racially targeted benefit from it. So that's my comment on that.
I move that we include a displacement preference that states residing in Menlo Park anytime for 3 or more years and displaced.
I second it. And I think I wasn't sure how we're going to do this. Let's do this piecemeal. So if that's all right, Mike.
If I may, through the chair, I was thinking I could record all of the recommended changes. So if there isn't opposition, basically as we're going through each one of these, then I'll take that as we have potential acclamation on that item, and that we could probably do just a group of these basically all together, and then one motion essentially, if that's okay. But open to suggestions.
Yes, let's do it that way.
And I'll do my best to record what we discuss right now. So basically, just on the displacement preference, we would essentially delete the 2008 year threshold, and the 3 or more years would be what would be added to that item specifically. Great.
And I believe we've covered the next item, unhoused people and households.
Right, and I'm happy to just confirm on that item before we move to the next one. So we would, if I was following correctly, we would reinstate the permanent residence and add an or to what has been added to the guidelines. And I wanted to confirm, I see Eric looks like he's going to come back on. I wanted to make sure that there wasn't an issue with keeping the current or the permanent resident, last permanent residence in Menlo Park if we've now also added the current residence provision.
No, the only suggestion that I would have for the commission to consider would be that the phrase read, for purposes of these guidelines, unhoused persons may show local residency by providing evidence that their last permanent and or their current residence was located in Menlo Park, so that it's clear that you don't have to have both of those conditions satisfied to qualify, which I think was the intent of the group. But otherwise, I didn't have any concerns with the change.
Hearing no objections, I think we have acclamation on that.
All right, and I will go ahead and change our slide. I just want to make a note. Apologies, I'm navigating quite a few things on my end, so I appreciate everyone's patience. Okay, and that takes us to live work, and I'll return the meeting over to the chair. Thanks.
Okay. Any comments on this? I like these changes. I think they're more inclusive. Does anybody have any disagreement with them? Hearing none, I think we have acclamation on this as well. Oh, Lauren just
Yes.
raised.
Yeah, just one point of clarification. Is unincorporated Menlo Park included in? Okay.
I'm shaking my head because I'm pretty sure the answer is no, but I'll let Mike answer.
Yeah, it's a great clarifying question. So it would only all of the provisions, all guidelines, only when it comes to the live work would be within our city boundaries. So it's within incorporated Menlo Park specifically.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
We can do I guess I should correct myself in saying that the displaced preference is specifically geared toward folks who have subsequently moved out of Menlo Park. But as far as the live work preference, or folks who qualify for the living in Menlo Park or working in Menlo Park, that would be specifically within the city's boundaries.
Got it. At one point in time, I think that we discussed having something of a tiered geographic preference as well, with it as living or having all of the separate live preferences or work preferences for Menlo Park, and then a separate one for the county, so we could kind of regionally move outwards. I don't know if there is interest in that, but I am welcoming a discussion.
You mean to say unincorporated Menlo Park, or did you mean to say county?
I meant to say county because that incorporates unincorporated Menlo Park.
But also a lot more. Interesting thought.
It incorporates a lot more. And also, I think it's pretty common for folks to have a lot of back and forth with several peninsula or San Mateo cities. So just a thought if we are trying to.
Why don't we, I think we didn't really notice that we would talk about this, so maybe we should talk about this.
Fair. Okay.
In our committee. All right, so by acclamation, I think we approve this. Hearing no objection, we can turn the page. Okay.
I have a lot of questions about this.
Go for it.
How many lists will the city or our partner have to maintain?
I spent a lot of time on this morning. Can I try to answer it?
I'm happy to assist, and please do, Madam Chair.
One list. It's a matter of how many times you go through the list in the lottery ranked order. You have a lottery ranked order of all the people on the interest list. You have one accessible unit. First, you go through the list, and it might be number 1, it might be number 99, but you look for the first person you find who fits in that unit and needs and is a Menlo Park household and has an accessibility need that matches that unit, or that matches what that unit can be made to provide or whatever. And that person gets that unit. Then you go back through the list and you look for the next accessible, no, sorry, for my example, we need 2 accessible units. You look at you go through the list again, and the next accessible units, in my fantasy, only one Menlo Park household needed an accessible unit. So, but there's a San Carlos household who needed an accessible unit, and they get that accessible unit. The third time you go through the list, all the people who are Menlo Park households get the units that are not accessible until you've exhausted all the Menlo Park households. And the fourth time you go through the list, non-Menlo Park households are assigned to units that are non-accessible. And that's it.
And if I may, Madam Chair, I'll just add one item, is that so our interest list, everyone would receive an email that a housing opportunity is coming online, and basically in their profile on the House Keys website, they would have selected that they either have an accessible need or meet one of the other preferences, and they would opt in. Essentially, they would be applying for that unit. So I just wanted to clarify that you are speaking about everyone who has applied to that opportunity, which I think you are, but I just wanted to add that folks do have to actively apply for the unit. I just wanted to clarify.
Okay, so Mike, let's talk about what will happen on Willow Road family housing. It'll be constructed in 18 months or so and would go through this process. There are 82 families that are coming back and 66 new homes. Every single one of those homes is adaptable. Is an adaptable unit, all 66 homes, going to have preference to after we go through whomever from Menlo Park may qualify, you know, our 30 on some on families from other parts of the region going to have preference above other families?
So I think that's a good question. So
I'm not saying I care one way or the other.
Sure.
I'm just like really trying to understand if you have on your 100% affordable units, everything's adaptable. How does this policy work within the context of the rest of our complicated system here?
And my understanding was that the guidelines are talking about fully accessible units, not simply adaptable units. So more like the way that the TCAC guidelines work. So as was mentioned, I think during public comment, when Section 504 applies, when projects are being developed by public financing using federal funds, then there are specific requirements to provide not just adaptable units, but fully accessible units as well. And then, for example, TCAC, the agency that oversees the distribution of tax credits, has a policy that require accessible units to be prioritized for occupancy by persons that have either mobility impairments, hearing, vision, or other sensory impairments, when those accessible units have features that are designed to help with address those particular access issues. And I think that this policy is meant to do something similar, that it wouldn't apply to every general adaptable unit, but in the event, and as Mike was saying, 5 to 10% of new units that come online are fully accessible, those would be the units that would be prioritized to be paired with individuals who would particularly benefit from those accessible features.
Yeah, the interesting thing that I have seen is that it's really hard to get the features right for who you're going to get. So almost everything has to be customized. And that's just reflects the diversity in our community. But a roll-in shower is great until you have a family with 3 kids wondering why they can't put their kids in the bathtub, for instance.
I would just say, I think it's another and situation. There are situations that are not mid-pen developments that are not universally adaptable. There's a shortage of accessible units in our BMR stock. And I think we really need to make sure that those units do not go to people who don't need them. And this does that. And it also, for your unit, your mid-pens units that are adaptable, it's basically going to be a Menlo Park household preference, and extra bonus if they need an adaptation that can be done. So is that correct, or is this making it harder for you to? I mean, I don't know. I'm gonna stop talking.
Can we?
I'm not sure. I mean, honestly, if this was something coming to me as a developer, I do not know how I would implement it. I would be having a lot of conversations with people like Eric and other attorneys to understand. I don't believe that we would, that my employer would maintain a single list. I think that there are a lot of concerns with this, and I think that they're worthy of study. I have a lot of questions still.
Can we take a step back further, which kind of gets to one thing Nevada mentioned, which is what we're considering accessible. I think I saw on a previous slide that we were only talking specifically about wheelchair users. Is that correct?
I'll let Mike answer that.
The current guideline is specific to wheelchair users. Okay. Yeah, there are a lot of different ways that we could be inclusive, like a person who has mobility issues is very different than a person who has difficulty with sight or hearing, and many other things. So with these trying to wrap my head around the practicality of it all. So we're saying that 5 to 10% of the units will be accessible to all disabilities? Is that correct?
Well, I think the only thing that the guidelines are saying is if a unit is created to be accessible, either because to satisfy funding requirements or building code requirements, but if it is an accessible unit, with accessible being more broad, more in line with the TCAC example, which could include as mobility impairments, as well as other sensory impairments. If there are units that are accessible, those units are prioritized to be a preference for people who have disabilities that would benefit from those accessible features. But not all units are accessible units, so this preference would not apply to all units.
Okay. I think I understand.
I have some data that I got today from Housing Choices that might be helpful in this situation. TCAC requires, I think, 18% of their units to be wheelchair accessible, and I think 12% to be vision and hearing accessible. So that's the approximate going forward.
For special needs properties, is that right?
It just was TCAC, I think. Right. It's a short email. So I don't have all the context. It was in 2020. Wait, those might.
It is interesting to me, like when something like this happens. So, okay, if we get behind this and move this forward, will this go to the city council for additional, will they be reviewing this? Just trying to think procedurally what happens, and like many policy setting exercises, if it's having an unintended impact, then we might take a look at it later on. There are a lot of things to like about it, and there are also a few things that give me a little bit of concern, but I'm not, I'm willing to give it a try. I would like to pick up Ms. Stokely's comment about, and I don't know if it's on this slide or a different one, but about the possibility of having the market rate community engage in kind of reasonable accessibility modifications. And I have a question for her, if that is something that Mr. Noche would permit me to do.
Can I quickly correct what I just said? I hate having said something that's not correct. The numbers that I cited are during the debate about TCAC accessibility and how they were trying to lower it, and the advocates from Disability Rights California submitted comments that about 17.9% of households that qualify for affordable TCAC housing include someone with a mobility disability, and 12.8% include someone with a hearing or visual disability. So
that sounds better. Yeah, I'm on board. Okay.
And yes, as chair, I say it would be helpful to have that question answered. Mike, is that all right?
Sorry, Karen, can you repeat that one more time? I accidentally muted myself and I didn't hear all of it.
Okay. I was correcting what I'd said earlier, and I closed the window having done so, but I will bring it up again. Here we go. Disability Rights California submitted comments that about 17.9% of households that qualify for affordable TCAC housing include someone with a mobility disability, and 12.8% include someone with a hearing or visual disability.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Mike, is it okay on a question?
And Madam Chair, I've allowed Ms. Stokely to address the commission again.
Yeah, I can restate my comment. So for affordable housing, landlords are required to make reasonable modifications for a person with a disability. In market rate housing, landlords are required to allow the modifications, but the tenant has to pay for them. And so, the attorney can correct me if I'm wrong, but with BMR housing, it's like market rate, right? But could the reasonable modification requirement be imposed on your BMR units, for example? So if you have a landlord like Greystar who says, well, we've met this by doing universal design, then you could say, great. And then you also need to pay for reasonable modifications that might be needed by any tenant of one of the BMR units. Would that be a good solution? That was my question.
I guess my
hope that's-
question back to you, Jan, thank you for restating that, it's fresh in our mind. My question to you, and I don't have the answer of this off the top of my head, is what do you think kind of the budget for a reasonable modifications would be?
So the affordable housing developers, they tend to balk at paying for anything more than in the $15,000 to $20,000 range.
Yeah,
They'll pay up to that amount. Typically, we can get them to. But with the market rate, they don't pay any of it. If we need modifications, we have to find money for the modifications. They're required to allow the modifications, but they don't have to pay for them. And so I think, as you said, like people need individualized modifications. So in a universal design apartment, maybe there's great turnaround for wheelchairs, but one of the kitchen counters would need to be raised for the wheelchair to go under it or something. In market rate, the landlord wouldn't have to pay for that. In affordable, they would have to pay for that modification rather than the tenant, as long as it was reasonable. And typically, in the context of reasonable modifications, the discussion around reasonable is always around how much it costs. And in the BMR units, these are folks who can't afford to pay much to get these wonderful universal design apartments modified.
So help us just parameterize this a little bit more. Is your suggestion for us to consider that, in new BMRs going forward, that modifications of up to X amount are taken on by the landlord?
Well, I think if you just say reasonable modifications, then the landlord has to engage in the interactive process under fair housing laws, right? So I don't know that you even need to specify an amount because it's probably going to change over time. But if you could say that in the BMR units, the landlord will make reasonable modifications. I thought it was particularly important for the Greystar property, which is universal design. So yeah, I don't know, or maybe it could be either or, universal design and make reasonable modifications in the BMR units, or don't have universal design, but have the 10% accessible using, the TCAC definition. Maybe that would be nice.
What is the difference between a reasonable accommodation and reasonable modification?
So reasonable accommodation is any exception to a policy, rule, or practice needed to accommodate a disability. Reasonable modification, it's a form of reasonable accommodation, but it refers specifically to a physical modification needed for the person with disabilities to get the full enjoyment of the unit, right? So when we talk about reasonable accommodations and reasonable modifications, it's the same concepts, but the reasonable modification ends up costing money. And for our low-income tenants, if that cost is shifted to them, it ends up like being very difficult to get the modification.
Got it. So for an example, it would be like giving a person a first floor apartment if they had difficulty walking versus trying to augment the design of the unit.
Right, yeah. Giving them the first floor unit would be a reasonable accommodation. Making physical changes to the unit would be a reasonable modification.
And under fair housing market rate, developers don't have to do reasonable modifications.
Yeah,
but
they have to
accommodations
allow
they do.
them, but they're allowed to shift the full cost to
Okay,
the tenant.
got it. Thank you. That was really helpful. I'm
I hope
sorry
it
for
was right.
interrupting, Nevada.
Your attorney can correct me. Thanks.
No, that I didn't have anything to add to actually that. Thought that summary was helpful and accurate. And the last thing that Ms. Stokely said, I just wanted to repeat that under the Federal Fair Housing Act, a private housing provider has to allow a tenant to install reasonable modifications, but it's not obligated to perform them itself.
That is significant. Learn something every day. Chelsea, you had your hand up and we're being very patient. I think you put it down. You're okay? All right.
Thank you. It's been answered. during
Okay. Great. Good. So I think, Nevada, one of the things you said is maybe we can go, well, you said a couple things. One is there's some confusion for how the Willow Road family housing would implement this as described. Has your confusion been cleared up a bit by the difference between a unit that can be made accessible, that's adaptable, and one that already is?
Yeah, I think so.
So would you be all right saying, are you okay with this policy as presented? And then as you've pointed out, we are going to be making changes in the next batch of changes. And if there's something that clearly needs fixing, we can put that in. Hopefully we can put that in the next round.
Well, do we want to consider Ms. Stokely's suggestion?
Yes, but I don't, I would love to be able to fit that in this round, but the next stop is city council. So I will ask staff if they think that's, my guess is better in the next round because we're doing a feasibility study.
Yeah, I would make that recommendation for your consideration, Chair, is that that be taken into account during the phase 2 updates, since it will affect feasibility.
Okay.
So just for clarity's sake, that's not this round, or this is this round?
It's not this round. This round is the preferences. Next round is the inclusionary requirements in terms of affordability level and percentage and all of that.
Okay.
Because it requires a study.
Got it. I am just going to put out there another data point, which is studies have shown that it's 25% more expensive for folks with disabilities to live the same quality of life as folks without disabilities. So I would strongly support us including some of that language so that we could be a more inclusive community.
Completely agree. I just, like I said, you learn something every day, and Jan, thank you for being here and for making your comment. Are we ready to move forward with what we have? All right. Seeing no objection, I think by acclamation, we are approving this slide. The changes summarized on this slide.
And if I may, Chair, and I don't want to cause any unnecessary length, but I just want to clarify that that staff will basically structure, so in association with expanding the preference to include all persons with accessible needs, will definitely include that component. Staff will then also essentially ensure that the language meets the second bullet here, ranking of accessible units. It meets how we would want it to be applied in practice. So staff will work within those boundaries to craft the guidelines essentially. Great, thank you.
And if you're going to incorporate the clarification that we're not talking about every single unit in a mid-pen development that can be made accessible, we're talking about the ones that are already accessible. Is that right? Actually, that's a question.
I believe that is correct. And I believe that's what Mr. Phillips had mentioned earlier, that it really just applies to the accessible units themselves, not across the board. It was my understanding, but please confirm, Eric. Okay, great.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. So seeing no hands raised, is that the direction we're giving? Yes, it is. Okay. Mike, are you ready to propose a motion for us?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. So I'll definitely look for someone to propose the motion, but I would like to summarize what I have here as what will be included in the motion, which would be for the displacement preference. We are going to delete the 2008 year threshold, still including the 3 or more years. And for the unhoused change, it will be we're basically keeping the last permanent residence in Menlo Park and or current residents within Menlo Park provision. The live work was as staff recommended, and the accessible unit, as we just discussed, would be the changes that I can reiterate now, which would expand the preference to include all persons with accessible needs. So staff will work within those boundaries to ensure that the guidelines are structured that way. And then that in practice, it will include those ranking priorities. And I think we will look for someone to make the motion at that time, unless there's any additional add-ons or edits.
I would like to just comment that when we put together the PowerPoint that said, insert people with disabilities having preference for accessible units into that PowerPoint, it was one slide and one line, and it seems so simple. I'd love to make the motion so I will move that since no one else is clamoring to move that one simple, easy bullet item in our PowerPoint forward. Do I have a second?
Sure.
Yay.
Chelsea, it's yours.
All right. Okay, we have a motion by Grove and second by Nguyen.
Thank you both. And if I may, Chair Grove, I'll go ahead and call for the roll call.
Yeah.
Thank you. Commissioner Bigelow.
Aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Leach is absent. Commissioner Merriman,
Yes.
Commissioner Nguyen,
Aye.
thank you. Commissioner Pimentel,
Aye.
thank you. And Chair Grove,
Yes.
thank you. The motion passes 501 with Commissioner Leach absent.
Okay, moving on quickly to item D4.
Oh, sorry, Madam Chair, I wanted to mention that I think Eric will probably leave us at this time. I just wanted to make that clear that I wanted to thank him for his participation. We very much appreciate it.
Very helpful to have you here. Thank you.
Great. Yeah, thanks for having me tonight. Good luck with the rest of your meeting.
Thank you. All right, so moving on to item D4, discussion of 2021 Housing Commission achievements. Well, we just achieved one nice thing. Mike, do you want to give us a, let's see, yes, this is your item to introduce.
Yes, thank you. And please give me one moment while I change gears here. My apologies. And I'm going to share my screen. Thank you all for your patience. I navigated everything. So I did a quick dive, and this item was something that the chair brought up, I believe at one of our past meetings, and reiterated, and I thought it would be a great addition to the meeting, just to provide a really brief recap of some of the events over the 2021 calendar year, and then also acknowledging that it continued to be a year that we were moving through the pandemic. So I think that deserves additional accolades on all of your parts. Last year, this actually started in 2020, which was the release of the NOFA, which was for $10 million. And I apologize for not having that on the slide, but it was released in 2020, and the city received 3 proposals in January of 2021. The commission, I know we provided updates on the work that was part of the 6 to 8 Coleman Place. And I believe there was a public comment potentially given on the item when it went to city council, but we did have to fast track it because it was the sale of those buildings for 6 and 8 Coleman. And that was purchased by HIP Housing with $5.5 million of city support. And then we had in May 2021, and it went to the Housing Commission a little before that. We had a $1.2 million get approved by City Council for a home ownership preservation program run by Habitat for Humanity. And I do have a brief update on that item. We've been working with Habitat for Humanity to get the program up and running here in early 2022. So that is still our goal, and we'll be moving forward with that. And then we have a still to be determined pending $3.6 million. There was a study session that went to City Council, and this item for Mid-Penn's Pierce Road development, which would bring 12 new townhomes for the 80% AMI bracket, which is a really important addition to our ownership inventory. So that item there is still pending City Council approval, but it is marked to go back to City Council for an initial funding to look into a community land trust model. So that'll be making its way, but it was approved by the Housing Commission last year during 2021. So other achievements that I just wanted to make a quick note of were the commission reviewed 7 term sheets on a variety of development projects. So that was all important input that the commission gave toward to staff and those developers as that move forward, and all of your comments, or at least your action items on those items, are recorded as it moves through the review process for every project. There was also feedback and review on the housing element APR, which is the annual progress report, and that'll be coming back to you in March, actually, at our next meeting for the 2021 calendar year. So you reviewed 2020 during 2021. Sorry, it's a bit confusing. That being said, there was also the formation of the Bmr Guidelines ad hoc subcommittee, which worked very hard to get us to that previous item this evening. And then there were multiple meetings. I believe I counted about 4, one special or a couple special meetings, and some items for the housing element update that were included in regular business items, and then a joint meeting with the Planning Commission, which I think is a really great achievement to highlight, because that was something that we always wanted to put together. And I know multiple commissioners, housing commissioners and planning commissioners had voiced bringing that together. So I definitely wanted to highlight, and that meeting took place on October 4th of 2021. So those are all of the achievements that I wanted to highlight, and I apologize if I left any out, but I'll pull the slides off of the screen, and I definitely, if anyone wants to add, and I'll return the meeting to the chair for how, if anyone wants to highlight any other achievements I might have left off. Thank you.
I just might want to add that it's not like something we voted on, but we did have a presentation from Samaritan House on the tenant relief program, tenant assistance program, that is the result of Housing Commission work in past years. And shortly after that, the City Council awarded Samaritan House $250,000 to continue to do tenant assistance and rent relief. I think that's pretty cool.
And if I may add to that as well, we are now calling that the the Housing Assistance Program. So it is the HAP program, was the new update where we added mortgage relief to the into that addition, just to add on. So thank you, Chair Grove, for highlighting that. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. It's nice to see all the things that we did, despite it being, I was thinking it was kind of a low outcome year, because it was kind of a year where we did a lot of work, but the NOFA was an outcome from previous year's work. So yeah. All right. Any other comments from commissioners? If not, we'll move on.
That all of this happened over Zoom.
Yeah.
In a pandemic year, so.
So previously, when we had our accomplishments, the chair would go and talk to the city council about it. Is that part of what you're thinking this information where this will go? Like,
right. So I think you're referencing I'm at a loss of words for the exact terminology, but I believe it's part of the Housing Commission's work plan. So that will go back to the city council. So yeah, so some of those highlights would be potentially included in that report. Yes, absolutely. This was really just meant to be a more of an informal celebration of all the work that you all do. So.
Okay, just wondering, because it looked a lot like that. I was like, okay, where's this going next? Okay, so this isn't directly teeing up to us presenting or talking about our work plan.
We haven't been invited to do so, but maybe because their agendas we're supposed to do it quarterly or every 6 months, and I don't know when we last did it. But it's a matter of city council agendas making room for it. And Mike, I'm wondering if we should ask city council if they would like us to do an update when we present the annual performance report.
Yeah, I'm happy to look into that. I believe I received an email on this. I think it was actually today. And I haven't had a chance to read through it in great detail, but I believe our timing is that we need to go back to city council, I want to say by the end of September. So, and I also want to find clarification just to that point on whether or not we'll be doing a 1 or 2 year work plan, because I think that was a question that came up in the past as well. So I'm happy to provide that information in the future to the commission.
Great.
Great, because I think all of those accomplishments that you have listed there, it's great to see. And then the other things that stand out for me is that our commission has re-articulated a desire to see housing where there's currently parking lots. So we have continued to really look at ways to advance that, and also a desire to be part of this very important discussion about affirmatively furthering fair housing. So we don't have the crisp bullet point yet, but I just want to say, put that out there.
In our work plan, we have an explicit goal of promoting extremely low income, especially for large families near El Camino and downtown. So, and to that end, one of the things, I think this may only have been in chair, vice chair agenda setting meetings, but we talked about prioritizing the Parkline development as a great opportunity to ask the developer to dedicate land to 100% affordable housing that can then be deeply affordable to people at all abilities. So that just sort of, I think it was something that Rhonda was excited about, and then Rhonda left, and it hasn't come up in our conversations, Mike, but we should talk about it. It's part of our, fits into our, it's an opportunity to act upon our work plan to achieve that goal.
And I just on the Parkline, so that's the Stanford, sorry, now I'm blanking on the name of that, sorry. Oh, I might be having connection issues.
SRI.
SRI, thank you. So the SRI campus, which also referred to as Parkline, I believe a potential proposal, I don't want to misspeak, it may be going to a planning commission meeting. I don't recall if the proposal will be making its way or if they'll be resubmitting. I'll follow up on that item, sorry, my apologies. But it may be making its way, so I just wanted to highlight that updates will be coming soon on that project overall.
And parking lots. All right. Any other comments? Okay, then moving on. Reports and announcements. I guess, Mike, you were saying we're not ready to reconvene the ad hoc BMR committee yet, based on your capacity.
Yeah,
Ad hoc.
Commissioner Grove, or Chair Grove, if I may. So the last item is on our agenda, and it's technically like a regular business item. So we should probably, just as a point of order, just ask if there's any public comment.
Oh.
For item D4, which is the discussion of the 2021 Housing Commission achievements.
Oh, okay.
If I may, for members of the public who are in attendance and wish to provide public comment on item D4, which is the discussion of 2021 Housing Commission achievements, please use the raised hand feature now, and I will unmute your microphone. All right, and I apologize for that interruption, Madam Chair, but I just wanted to make sure we got to that, and I'll return the meeting to you. I do not see any public comments.
I've lost track. I think we are on commissioner updates. No, ad hoc subcommittee reports. And so my question is, I don't believe we have any ad hoc subcommittees at the moment. So we'll skip that and go to commissioner updates. Are there any commissioner updates? Seeing none. Any recommendations for future agenda items?
If I may, Chair Grove, I'd I'd appreciate the opportunity for us to discuss an idea that came up in an op-ed that I co-authored to propose to the city council a process by which the city council might solicit bids or proposals from developers to develop high density and affordable housing on the downtown parking lots, which would be net parking neutral, meaning there'd be no loss on the existing parking spots, plus new parking spots for any new residential development. And in exchange for a long-term lease on that land, the developer or the city would authorize potentially higher exemptions for higher buildings and exemptions for more density in the housing. I think it'd be worth us talking about as a proposal to encourage the city council to see what the market might propose in regards to a housing and parking series of project proposals downtown.
Okay, I've got that noted.
Thank you.
Any other agenda items to propose? All right, staff updates and announcements. Mike?
Thank you. So I did want to highlight the one-day homeless count is scheduled for February 24th. So that is organized through the county, I believe, and I don't have the exact email address, but if anyone's interested or if any commissioners have it, please feel free to share. But anyone who's interested, please reach out to me, and I'm happy to share that information. I know they are looking for volunteers to participate in the one-day homeless count, and that's something that does happen annually, typically, I believe, and countywide.
It happens every 2 years.
2 years, excuse me.
And it was delayed a year because of COVID. And then it was delayed an extra month because of more COVID.
Correct, right. Yeah, it was originally scheduled in January.
I wasn't able to do it at the last time it was brought up on Housing Commission, but I did sign up for this time, so it'll be interesting experience.
Awesome, thank you. Next update, so the Housing Commission vacant seat, so that'll be part of the chair, or excuse me, chair, not chair, but the terms that'll be coming up. So I think the chair's term is the only one that I think is coming up in April. And of course, welcome to reapply to the commission, of course. So we'll have 2 vacant seats coming up in this. So I think originally we were hoping to fast track a potential recruitment, but it'll be basically packaged together. So we'll have 2 vacant seats coming up on the commission, which I believe timeframe for that will be in April, but I think the applications, if not already released, should be released to the city clerk's office very soon. Most likely in February or early March at the latest, I would assume. I also wanted to mention that City Hall, for the most part, this includes all staff, but City Hall offices are following a 980 schedule. So we will be off every other, or excuse me, I will be off every other Friday, but City Hall will be closed every other Friday. So this is the Friday, I believe we are in the office. My weeks are going by pretty quick. And then next Friday would be our Friday off. And the schedule is on the city's website. And I did want to mention the city does have a new website, which you probably get redirected regardless to when you go to menlopark.org. But basically to go directly to the city's new website, I wanted to highlight, you would type in beta, so that is B as in boy, beta.menlopark.org. And if you'd like to visit our housing assistance program, you would do /HAP. And that would be the hot short link basically to take you directly to that page on the website. And the housing assistance program, for anyone who wasn't listening earlier, is run by Samaritan House. Last update, we did wish a great farewell to our city manager, Starla Jerome Robinson, and our interim city manager, who was our deputy city manager and has been with the city for many, many years, is Justin Murphy, who many of you may know, but that is who you will see in the interim city manager role moving forward. I believe that's already effective, if I'm not mistaken, I think as of this week. So I think that rounds out all of my updates, and I'll return to the chair.
Can I prompt you to do one more? There's a housing element community public input meeting Saturday. I think it's February 12th at 10 a.m. I'm looking it up.
Yes,
So
I'll confirm. That sounds correct, but I can confirm as well.
The 12th
Thank
at. Okay. With
Yeah,
that,
oh, I'm sorry. I guess I froze. Yes, it is the February 12th at 10 a.m. correct, and there'll be a Zoom link, and it information should be on the city's website, on the city calendar, I believe is where you'll be able to find a link to that for anyone who's interested. Thank you, Chair Grove, for highlighting that.
I find it at the housing element page under the timeline, project timeline link.
Correct.
So with that, I think we're ready to adjourn. I'm gonna pause. Any reason not to? No. Okay. With that, at 9:09, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.
Setting a good tone for 2022. Thank you.
Thanks all. Have a good night.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.